Welcome to the OMG Podcast, brought to you by Onward Media Group. Join us as we explore storytelling with video, life as a startup, and community impact in Kitchener-Waterloo. We dive into industry trends, behind-the-scenes insights, and the challenges and successes of our journey. Whether you're a creative, entrepreneur, or just passionate about video and storytelling, we've got something for you. Now let's get into today's episode.
Hello and welcome to today's show. Today we're joined by Armen Bakirtzian, CEO and co-founder of Intellijoint and the driving force behind Medical Innovation Xchange, or MIX. Armen, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Darren.
Thank you. I want to start a little bit with what your journey and kind of how you got to starting Intellijoint as a fourth-year design project in university.
Yeah, well, I mean, like a lot of engineering students at the University of Waterloo, going through the program and getting into our final year design project, we had one kind of constraint that was told to us by our profs, which was do something novel, do something new, do something exciting. I had always been interested in the field of medicine. My father is an orthopedic surgeon. I think orthopedic surgeons naturally try and push their kids to follow in their footsteps. But I was always interested in how stuff worked, so I gravitated towards engineering, and our fourth year design project was the perfect opportunity to kind of blend those two interests of engineering and medicine. So I was fortunate, my unfair advantage is my dad is an orthopedic surgeon, so I watched him do surgery. It happened to be a hip replacement surgery, and he told me, flat out, when I do these surgeries, I rely on my training and my judgment. I'm human, unfortunately, sometimes I make mistakes. So that was really the problem statement that informed myself and my co-founders that, hey, there's something here that's worth solving. Let's commit our final year of engineering school to try and create a prototype that can help surgeons like my dad.
And when we spoke last, you kind of talked about how, when it comes into starting a project like that, even at the fourth year level, it was problem oriented as opposed to just kind of a big picture idea. You believe kind of in that spirit of entrepreneurialism is finding a problem and figuring a way to solve that. Kind of speak a little bit more to that if you can.
For sure. I mean, my take is if you find a real problem to solve, you solve that problem elegantly, you have customers. It's different than trying to create something that you think is cool and then trying to find somebody else that thinks it's cool and somebody else that thinks it's cool, because not just one person has to think it's cool, a whole market has to think it's cool. That's how you'll be able to sustain your business. So we've really been focused on finding real problems to solve and solving those problems in an elegant way that actually addresses any problem or adoption hurdle that has prevented similar types of things from being solved in the past. So, for us, we're a medical device company, so we didn't look at just what's the clinical problem here. We tried to also look at the environment in which the solution has to be successful. So we really looked at the breadth of opportunity, and we understood the breadth of the environment where the solution has to be successful. And that really informed a lot of things for us in terms of the design of the product. So, there were other technologies available that could help orthopedic surgeons like my dad at the time, but they cost too much money, they added too much time to surgery, they forced surgeons to change their workflow, they forced surgeons to change their implants. And for us, that was part of the problem. That's why my dad didn't adopt those types of technologies. So it wasn't just that, hey, a surgeon can use more accuracy or precision to place implants in the body, but it has to be fast, it has to be open platform, it has to be easy to use, it has to be inexpensive. And those were all things that went into our problem statement that helped us create a technology that actually addressed it full on.
It's really impressive to hear you say that, and even just in the sense I'm thinking, okay, at one point your engineering students, this is a project. How did it go from project to, okay, we actually have a real business here, and this is like, where do we take this to the next level?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, we graduated in 2008. Maybe we had a blend of optimism and paranoia at the time, so we actually filed for a patent right out of undergrad, so back in 2008. We thought we had something interesting that we didn't want to give up, but entrepreneurship wasn't that popular. There weren't banners on Columbia Street about your journey starts here or whatever it was. My dad's a clinician, which makes him kind of conservative. So it's maybe not. What about more school? So that's what my co-founders and I did. Like a lot of confused kids, you just do more school. So I did mine in biomedical engineering, at the University of Toronto. My co-founder Andre did his in electrical engineering here at UW, and my other co-founder, Richard, did his in medical robotics at McMaster. But because we were optimistic, we thought we had something cool, we didn't give up on it. So evenings and weekends, really whenever we had free time during our masters, we would get together in one of our basements and kind of just try and move the ball forward, a bit. And it wasn't until the summer of 2010, our final kind of summer of our master's programs, where we found out about a pitch competition called Ontario's Next Top Young Entrepreneur. It was put on by OCI. We were fortunate enough to win that competition. That gave us $18,000, which was, a big pile of cash for us at the time. And it gave us, introduction to a very famous orthopedic surgeon. And we got a piece of advice then, which was, if you're going to fail fast and move on, do something else. Which, it's kind of maybe weird to hear, but really important advice. So, we met with as many orthopedic surgeons that would take our meeting over 12 months, and we tried to fail on purpose. We tried to get the surgeons to tell us, this is a bad idea, you should stop doing this. And ultimately, none of them were able to convince us it was a bad idea. So what did we conclude? That, hey, it must be a good idea, and let's go at this thing full time. So that's what it took us to build the confidence in ourselves and in the solution that we created. And those 12 orthopedic surgeons actually became our designers, they became our consultants, and they became early investors. So that added a lot of credibility to our story early on.
It's a really interesting piece of advice to give to someone, is like, fail fast if you're going to fail. Because I think, when I think of that kind of concept, a lot of times you go in with, I believe this is a good solution, but now I have to convince others. And so instead of going in and being like, tell me it's bad, it's like, I'm going to try and make sure you tell me it's good. So it's an interesting way of approaching it, and probably an effective way, even though maybe a little bit scary to go into it. But if you believe in what you're working on, going into that and saying, okay, listen, you tell me if this is a bad idea, and I'll just stop. I'll go move on.
We'll do something else.
It's a pretty good way of testing it, though. I think.
You're right. It is scary, right? Because you're basically putting yourself out there and inviting
something you've worked really hard on over the course of many years, to then be, go in front of someone and tell me this is bad. All this hard work I've done, please tell me how bad it is.
But you know what? That was the foundation of resilience for us, because that's what you need as entrepreneurs, right? You get knocked down, you stand up, you dust yourself off, and you go at it again. And opening yourself up to those types of experiences and taking risks and exposing yourself, I think was an important foundation for us as entrepreneurs and as founders, to put yourself out there and, see what happens, kind of thing. It takes a little bit of courage to do that, and it was scary for sure, but we wanted to have ultimate confidence that this was the right thing for us to do. Like, we said, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to do it properly. We're not going to, have one foot in, one foot out. We're going to go in with both feet, and we need the confidence to do that. So let's get orthopedic surgeons to tell us, this is bad, or this is kind of good.
Because you get to move on after that. Or like you said, the resiliency piece. That is one of the most common themes I think we have when we talk to different leaders and different people that have grown successful businesses, is that resiliency piece. Because you're going to get knocked down. Like, it's not going to just be, all upward trajectory and everything is all roses and sunshine. You're going to get kicked in the face sometimes. And those that have the resiliency will overcome it and pursue and push to pass that. And then those that don't likely aren't entrepreneurs today, right? So it's a really common theme that we've heard from many different leaders that we've spoken to. I would like to talk a little bit about, kind of still along the lines of the problem solving. When you look at young entrepreneurs today, and I think you do experience this a little bit probably with Mix as well, how do you guide someone through that? Like, how did it, when you're looking to solve a problem, how do you find the right problem to solve? And for those that think they have an idea, is there a way to tie it to a problem? Like, is there a way to kind of build what you think, I have this really good idea? How do you tie it to a problem to solve, if that's the case?
Yeah, I find you have to start with the problem. I mean, find something you're passionate about and find your unfair advantage. You mentioned Mix. Interestingly enough, most, if not all, of the companies at Mix are technical founders with clinician parents. So it's kind of odd, right? And
it's very niche.
It's very niche, and we have relationships with our parents, obviously, and clinicians have all kinds of problems that need to be solved, and engineers look for problems to be solved, right? So it's kind of a perfect match, and it just so happened that, founders with strong relationships with their parents understand the problems that their parents have, and guess what? It's not just their parents that have these problems. It's all clinicians in that kind of vertical that have similar problems. Right. So, it's I hear technical, folks at the engineering schools that they want to find a problem to solve. They want to, start a company. And really, I say, no, don't look much further than your local hospital. Like, I guarantee you, a clinician, you walk down the hallway, they're going to have a problem, and they're going to be open about sharing that problem with you. So that's, one thing I try and advocate for in our community here is to create closer connections between the hospital community and the universities, because you have engineers at the university that want to become entrepreneurs, especially in this community now. The focus on life science and medical technology is greater than it's ever been, but you still need to have access to a clinician to figure out what problem you're trying to solve. And it kind of goes back to the earlier point of, you can't just guess about a problem, or you can't just come up with a cool technology and then find a home for it. It doesn't kind of work that way. At least in our experience, we've found successful companies or successful entrepreneurs solve real, difficult clinical problems, and ultimately that, it kind of, you get some customers because of that, because hey, everybody has this problem, and you solve it in a nice way, and they're going to buy your product. So that's what I try and advocate for, is really focus on the problem statement first. If you don't have clinicians or whoever in your immediate sphere, use programs like Velocity, like the University of Waterloo, leverage relationships with Grand River Hospital and other hospitals in the community and other cities around the world, and people will tell you their problems, right? And then they'll want to be involved in creating the solution for that problem, because clinicians have these problems, but they don't have the time, energy, or space to solve them, and that's where engineers can come in and play a significant role.
And is that kind of the intention of Mix, is to kind of not necessarily Mix in itself, but to create an environment that is collaborative in nature, but also connecting people who can thrive in in the MedTech space, and also be close to the hospitals, the university, the engineers? Like, is that kind of the motivation behind that?
Well, the motivation is really to help scaling companies, but we try and organize the community to create those types of collisions, that will ultimately start new companies. And Mix focuses on scaling MedTech companies, and we try and encourage more people to enter entrepreneurship through the connections of the ecosystem. So, Velocity is a great partner to Mix. Grand River Hospital and others in the region are great partners to Mix. So once companies get started, the employees of Mix will actually mentor that early stage company while they're housed at the university or at Velocity. And basically, once they go through the Velocity program and they graduate, well, then they actually graduate into Mix. So Mix is a later stage accelerator and a hub that accepts graduates from early stage incubators and really supports their scale. It's difficult to scale a medical technology company, period, and it's even more difficult to do it from Canada. We think there is a tremendous opportunity to retain our MedTech companies and to help them scale while keeping their roots firmly planted in this region, and that's the problem. Again, problem-oriented, that Mix was created to solve. We want to retain our companies. We do a decent job, a good job of starting them. We don't do a great job of retaining them, and that's the problem Mix is trying to solve.
How have you seen the MedTech space grow? So where it is today, obviously it sounds like things like Mix that are trying to help it, those relationships with Velocity and the accelerator centers. Yeah. Where was it in 2010 in comparison? Like, I feel like it's probably grown a lot. I think even when we spoke about it. How do you see that difference between 2010 and now, and then how do you want it to go in the future?
It's night and day. I mean, when we started in 2010, life science and healthcare wasn't really a thing in the community at all. Obviously, tech has always been, quote unquote, popular here, but MedTech was not really that way. It's somewhat illogical to start a MedTech company in this region, but we're optimistic. We're adorers of this community, and we thought there's tremendous potential here. As I mentioned before, I did my master's in Toronto. My co-founder did his in Hamilton, and my other co-founder did his here at Waterloo. So we had a choice.
It's true.
Where are we going to start? We're going to start in Toronto, in Hamilton, or in KW. Obviously, there was a tie to this region because we all did our undergraduate degrees here, but there's different, elements of value in the different communities, right? But, Waterloo to us there's a unique culture here, a pay-it-forward culture that is extremely, extremely nice, and one that we value kind of tremendously. And geographically, Waterloo is actually very uniquely positioned. We're an hour from London, we're an hour from Hamilton, we're an hour from Toronto. And these are all strong clinical centers, right? So you have access to all of these great places. You've got the technical talent from the university, and a little bit of finger crossing and hope that MedTech would become more popular here, and life science would be, a pillar of the development of this community. So then, of course, we see the city of Kitchener, make a Kitchener strategy, and life science was an important part of that. Of course, we see the University of Waterloo hire Vivek as their president, a former doctor, pushing the community towards life science. Of course, the university made a bid and won, to have the new hospital on campus. Now the province of Ontario has made a hard pivot towards life sciences. So all of the pieces are starting to fall into place, and it's really keeping them organized and advocating for the domestic sector. To me, that's the tremendous opportunity that we have. And now that there's a focus on life science and MedTech, we cannot lose sight of the domestic innovators, because the domestic innovators are the ones that are going to provide a disproportionate amount of value economically into the ecosystem. So, the time is now for us. The environment is ripe, and we've got to take advantage of the opportunity in front of us.
It's what I find so fascinating about it is that you can see, even just as someone who's not in medtech space, you can see the shift in it. And you can see, obviously, the advances in technology aid in that, but even just seeing it locally, as you mentioned with the hospital, does some of the push to get to this space, like even from 2010 and now, does it come from the university side? Does it come from the educational side to kind of push through the graduates to encourage them into that med space? Do you think that's a little bit of where it starts?
Yeah, I think it's multifactorial. I mean, having success in some companies, I think also students can point to it, right? Hey, look at Intellijoint, look at Vena Medical, look at Fluid AI, look at Bloom, look at High Ivy, look at these companies that have started. Hey, maybe I could do that too, and do it from this region. So I think, some of the companies that have made it through that difficult startup phase and are in the scale-up phase provide examples of success. And Velocity itself, I think, has been a big push and a big supporter of the shift towards life science. Having infrastructure available to students to actually be able to come up with these types of solutions. Like, you need to have lab space, you need to have this type of stuff. And without the infrastructure, it's really difficult. Even if you have the intention and the desire to start, you don't have the infrastructure to do it. So, of course, the university has a tremendous role to play. The hospital has a tremendous role to play, and the partnership that exists between the hospital and the university, I think is tremendous. Like, that type of thing did not exist when we started. Everyone was in their own bucket, staying isolated from everybody else. And it's really collaboration, integration, and partnerships, I think, that really move the needle in a big way, and a collective vision on what is possible in the community if we all, hold hands and put our arms around each other and move forward. That's what it takes. It takes a community to build an ecosystem of medtech. It's not easy to do, but the potential is there, and the returns are huge, not only from a health benefit, but an economic development perspective as well. So, that's why I always advocate for the domestic sector, because, we're the ones that develop the technologies. We're the ones that own the patents. We're Canadian. We can generate revenue globally with that, bring that revenue back to Canada, get taxed on that revenue, and give a lot more back to the economy. Of course, we can employ people like everybody else, but we actually will be able to own the ideas that come from these people, and ultimately generate revenue off of that and have it taxed here in Canada. We got to own the ideas, right? You can't just have the jobs. You got to own the ideas that come from those jobs.
And the beauty of it is that MedTech and this technology and these advancements, they're meant to help people. They're meant to help the surgeons, they're meant to help the hospitals, but they're also meant to help people and their health in a way that is, like you said, bringing it back to the beginning, your father has to rely on his training to do so. But if we could eliminate some of the human aspects of surgeries that may seem minor, but it may be someone's hip for the rest of their life that they have to be able to, walk around and function at normal. So I think there's the beauty of the two sides. One, you can generate revenue for the economy here, but you're also aiming to help people in the health space as well.
Of course, and that's why we're so passionate about actually breaking through from an adoption perspective, right? I mean, we hear it time and time again. You talk to 10 MedTech companies, 9.9 of them don't sell their products here in Canada, which is a shame, right? Like, especially because a lot of us got our start through grants and loans and those types of things that were funded by taxpayers. But we've created products and technology with that taxpayer money that's not going to benefit the taxpayer. It's kind of unfortunate, right? So, we're quite passionate about that, and we've butted our head against the wall many a time to find a door for us to go through, and we're fortunate to have found some success in Canada. Our first public hospital that bought our technology was Humber River Hospital in Toronto. Back in 2022, we've enabled a lot of positive things, not only for their patients, but for the province as well. We've helped the surgeon go from doing 3 to 4 surgeries a day to 12 to 14 surgeries a day. So just think about, the amount of productivity and efficiency gains that they've been able to get while improving the outcomes for patients. So we're better than the standard of care that they were doing beforehand, and we've increased their throughput by 3 times.
It's kind of like a no-brainer.
It's kind of a no-brainer,
yeah,
right?
kind of a no-brainer. Are the roadblocks most prevalent because of the public versus private system? Like, is that where the most obvious difference between the U.S. system and the Canadian one?
I would say so, yeah. I mean, it's not the fact that it's publicly funded versus privately funded, it's the behaviors that result from that. So the difference between Canadian and American hospitals are happiest when they're full, Canadian hospitals are happiest when they're empty. So in the
really
U.S.,
interesting, kind of way to sum it up.
for sure. I mean, you want to attract patients.
Yep.
In the U.S., it's a competitive world, right? So the more patients you're able to attract, the more revenue you make. And technology is used as a way to attract patients, right? Because if you go for your hip or your knee and you have a bad outcome, guess what? You're going to tell everybody you know, don't you dare go to that hospital. I had a bad outcome there. So that the focus on outcomes is kind of inherent through the competitiveness of the U.S. market. So they're willing to spend money on improving the outcome of surgery, even if it means at a loss financially, because they're going to trade some margin of the surgery for volume. And that competitive dynamic doesn't exist in Canada. And a technology like Intellijoint improves the outcome for that patient. But of course, doing a surgery by eye doesn't add any money. But if you're using technology like Intellijoint, it adds money to surgery. But it's for the benefit of that patient and the benefit of the system overall, not necessarily for that hospital while the patient is in their care. So, we've been fortunate to work with the province here in Ontario to essentially say, how can we create pathways that ultimately prove the benefit to the system? Because it's the hospital that pays for a technology, but it's the province that benefits from it. So, the province has been a great partner. They actually invested $1 million at Grand River Hospital to evaluate the clinical and economic benefits of Intellijoint, ultimately for the goal of getting a reimbursement code, so an OHIP code, because that's ultimately what innovators need domestically to break through, because any new product or technology that is disruptive has no way of getting paid for by the system today, right? It's disruptive, it's not replacing anything, which means there's no mechanism to pay for that thing. So if you want to get that thing in the hospital, you got to figure out how to get it paid for. And the province has been a great partner to try and figure that out.
So that kind of leads to my next question, which is, what is next for Intellijoint?
Sure.
Because I do think it's really interesting that you say that about the province, because when you look at the framework of understanding, okay, we have a solution for a hospital locally, but I have to go to the province to even be able to have a viable solution that can be actually implemented province-wide versus trying to convince a hospital, because that's not where the decision making happens essentially.
Yeah, and I mean, we've been fortunate to have orthopedic surgeons that love what we do. I mean, they've designed our product. I mean, we had mostly Canadian surgeons help us out, and once those surgeons advocated to their hospital to, buy our product, the hospitals clammed up basically, and it unfortunately was a no kind of across the board. So like every other MedTech company, we focused outwards. We focused on the U.S. We're in the U.S., we're in Australia, we're in New Zealand, we're in Japan, we're in Singapore, we're in Saudi Arabia. Wow. And I think we did our first 50,000 surgeries outside of Canada before we did our first 1,000 here, which is crazy.
It brings it back to that point about like we're not doing a good job of keeping
Correct.
these innovations, these technologies, these businesses, these developments in the region, in the province, in the country, because it's not as viable to just, I can go out and do more elsewhere.
And it's illogical to be in a place where your customers are not, right?
Yeah.
And that's why most companies that start up in Canada don't stay here, right? They're going to go to where their customers are. They're going to go where there's infrastructure and capital. And that's I think the approach of Mix is, let's try and change that story. Let's create the infrastructure. Let's create a logical reason for founders to retain their businesses here in Canada. Intellijoint made an emotional decision to stay here. We're trying to create logic for others to make logical decisions, to stay here. And the Premier came to our office back in 2020. I had a couple of minutes with him before he made an announcement from our space. I gave him one piece of paper that had our number of surgeries by country, and of course Canada was the bottom of the list. And he took it upon himself to invite me to Queen's Park to talk to the right people, and ultimately that has led to these types of conversations. Because ultimately, I think it's a shame to lose the innovations, the companies, the clinical benefits, and the economic benefits that our companies provide. And as you said, we're in health, right? We help people get back to their normal daily life, to be contributing to their families and to the economy. And why would you let us kind of walk out the door? So that's what we're excited about the future. It's partnerships to bring our technologies into our home market. It's our ability to expand in the U.S. market. Intellijoint took a really unique approach of going deep in a small number of markets in the U.S. or small number of cities before we went kind of nationwide. So still today, 8 years after commercial launch in the U.S., we're in 6 metropolitan areas in the U.S. And that seems like a small footprint. It is a small footprint, but we've been able to go so deep in those markets that Intellijoint was the fastest growing company in Canada on Deloitte's Fast 50 list in 2020. And we've been able to prove that we can get deep adoption in those core markets. We can create a profitable business model in the US. And now the risk, if there is risk to us, is to how do we now scale that kind of across the US? Because what others have done is let's go get 1-2% adoption nationwide without any evidence how you go deeper down the adoption curve. We did it the other way. Let's stay in a small number of areas, force ourselves to go deep down the adoption curve, and then the way we scale is by basically launching new geographies. We think that's a lower risk way to scale, and we have more evidence to prove that we can go deep down the adoption curve. So that's what we're excited about. We're going to grow more aggressively in the US. We turned our model profitable in the US for the first time this year, so that gave us the confidence to let's add fuel to this fire. So that's what we're going to do next year.
Awesome. It sounds great. And it just as you're saying that, it makes me think how kind of sad it is the way you kind of speak to the U.S. system versus the Canadian system, because it doesn't need to be that way. And I think being able to see how successful it has been in the U.S., there's no reason it shouldn't be this case. But changing the mindset of public institutions in general, let alone in the healthcare space, of that it's not a competitive nature. We're trying to serve the least amount of people as possible, because the model's kind of broken in that sense, right? Where it's like you said, in the U.S., it's like the more people we want is more money for us, more revenue. We're helping more people. Canada is a little bit backwards. So it's not that there's not the desire at any of the levels. I think it's that just the systematic approach to being less people in beds in hospitals is better for us. And so adopting services that could, it is a mindset shift, I think. And that's probably a huge challenge to overcome in Canada.
For sure. And you make a great point. It's nobody wants to be in that kind of world in the Canadian system, right? Everybody wants to innovate. They want to deliver the best possible care for their patients, but you're constrained by your environment and the funding models that exist. And it really takes a lot of hard work, determination, grit, passion, and care to try and change the conversation, because we think it's the right thing to do, right? I mean, again, we've created something on the backs of Canadians. They're only deserving to have the benefit of the technology that they helped create. And we find it's our responsibility to change that conversation, to break through and create a channel for us to deliver our technologies to the Canadian market for the benefit of Canadians.
Awesome. I wanted to kind of end off with some general insights. You're a really impressive guy, and the growth of Intellijoint and your ability to kind of create this collaborative market here. When you think about the next generation of, well, specifically MedTech entrepreneurs, what kind of advice would you give them as they're starting to think about, maybe they're in university still, maybe they have a clinician as a parent, and they're starting to think about this space. What kind of advice would you give to somebody who is kind of coming up in that system?
Yeah, great question. And one thing I like to say is this is a difficult journey, but it's a rewarding journey. And when we started, ignorance was bliss, definitely. We didn't know what we didn't know. But in hindsight, given all the challenges and the ups and downs, I would not trade anything that we've gone through. It's been a tremendously rewarding experience, and it can be scary to go down the world of MedTech and entrepreneurship, but I encourage everybody to follow this path. It is extremely rewarding. You get to create something that adds value to somebody's life. When do you have the opportunity to do that, and to do it at scale is such a privilege, right? And it's just such a unique opportunity, from an ability to create something that adds value clinically to a patient, but also to build yourself as an individual and to create a career path that, to me, is just something that you will never be able to do in any other place that you work. Like, as a founder, you learn so much, right? And one thing I like to say is engineers can learn anything. Like, you go to engineering school to learn. You learn how to learn. What you learn in school, the content that you learn, sure, like, that's important, and you probably forget it, but you learned how to learn that thing. And whatever you want to learn as an engineer, I think you can learn that. And entrepreneurship, the things that you need can be learned, I think. And it's really the confidence, to go down that pathway. And it's just an awesome thing to go through. Obviously, it comes with its challenges, but it's such a rewarding journey, and something that I look back on the last 15 years, and I'm super proud of what we've been able to do, and the 65,000 people that we've been able to help, and hopefully we'll do hundreds of thousands more. And we've been able to surround ourselves with awesome people that have a passion for what we do, and that it drives you, right? It doesn't make it feel like work. It's like, we kind of quote unquote work around the clock, but this is something that's important to us. And I just encourage more and more people to go down this path. It's super rewarding, and it's enlightening. It's a privilege.
And I think the fulfillment piece, like the rewarding piece, I think most of us would agree that pursuing something that you're passionate about but also get some fulfillment out of is a lot more rewarding than any other types of opportunities. So it is good, and it's, again, you've spoken to some of the things that we hear consistently about from other leaders as well. But it sounds like the future is bright for Intellijoint, for Mix. So. It's a really fascinating environment. You're really inspiring in terms of, especially with locally, to be able to see someone like you who has had success in the States but put his roots down in Waterloo region, even though you're not even from Waterloo region. So that speaks to this community, and it speaks to kind of your commitment to this community. So I appreciate your time on the show today. It was really great chatting with you, and it was a great time. Appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thank
you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the OMG Podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and gained some valuable insights into storytelling with video, startup life, and our community impact in Kitchener-Waterloo. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on social media to stay updated on future episodes. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, reach out to us at info@onwardmediagroup.com.